And good morning, afternoon, evening, depending on which crazy time zone you're in. So today, this morning, whatever day it is, I was just going to share some updates on things I'm learning about, trying to learn, some BC updates, and a little life hack of sorts that I figured out several months ago. And the phone rings, even though I have it turned off. Don't know how that works. Okay. So with that distraction, is this thing working? Okay, looks like it is. And sound check. I think we're good. Okay, so today's coffee is Tony's coffee, and it is a medium roast Sumatra. Good stuff. And I don't know a whole lot about coffee. I'm still learning, but this is from a 2021 Roaster of the Year winner, Roast Magazine, to which I do not subscribe. Takengon Highlands of the Aceh province of the island of Sumatra, Indonesia. Very exotic sounding. And it says, full body, mellow acidity, deep earthy tones, clean and well-rounded. I can attest, it is tasty. Earthy and robust, heavy body, which is interesting. I didn't know body was a thing in coffee until a week or two ago when I ordered this. And I've heard of it for wine, full-bodied wine, but I'm now exploring the concept of full-bodied coffee. So anyway, yeah. So with the coffee brewed, I have been working on learning OAuth finally over the last week for use with Business Central REST APIs. Not to be easily confused with Business Central Web Services or SOAP or OData or the many other variants that exist with Business Central. REST APIs are like the kind of new API that you theoretically should be talking to, even though it may not be the easiest or most convenient or most flexible or most accessible to a non-technical, non-developer resource who wants to expose a page. But I digress. There is a URL here, which I'll try to remember to put in the comments of the YouTube video or the description. And it is talking about developing what they used to call connect apps. I don't know that that phrase really gets used much anymore, but there was this concept of, they used the phrase to create connect apps to connect to the BC REST APIs. That was kind of an integration mechanism. Now, I think it's more just REST APIs is used as a term to describe these. And this documentation does not help clarify the authentication process, I don't think. It still offers the web API key as a authentication mechanism, but it does clarify that you need to use what they call Azure Active Directory based authentication if you are going to connect to these APIs in a production instance. I'm pretty sure that's what I just read this morning. And further not clarifying things, they mix the phrase Azure Active Directory Authentication and OAuth v2, which you can see there. So when going into production, you should use Azure Active Directory AAD / OAuth v2 authentication and the common endpoint, which I still quite haven't figured out what any of that means in terms of endpoints, because there are like 17 of them that I will never remember. I'm going to have to document. So a blog post will come eventually. It's several URLs, none of which I'll be able to remember, and I'm going to have to look them up every single time. I believe most of the URLs will be in code or in your tool or whatever you're using to configure to connect to these endpoints with OAuth v2 or Azure Active Directory based authentication. But it's a bit of a mess, and it seems to be a mess because OAuth is itself just, I get it, makes total sense technically, that type of authentication, but it is not simple or obvious or user-friendly in my humble opinion. And not only that, but I have been warned that every single OAuth authentication scheme that you may run into with different web services may have different implementations. So you can, if you're into Business Central, you can learn the Business Central implementation of OAuth, which is apparently an implementation provided by Azure Active Directory. You can figure that out, but that will just be Azure's OAuth implementation with BC. If you go to, Stripe or some other OAuth implementation, whoever is implementing it, that may be a different implementation of OAuth with different quirks and fun. So I'm just learning the process, but I'm going to try to write a blog post of just, hey, I'm not going to teach you OAuth. Here's simply the mechanics, the steps you will perform in order to get this working, and I'm not going to attempt to explain why or how. Just do this, and as long as my instructions are still valid in 6 months, hopefully it works. So that's what I'm learning. Next up, I've said this many times. If you are not following Yun Chu on Twitter, you should be if you are into Business Central. If you are not paying attention to his blog, you should be. If you've ever written a blog post, you know it can be kind of tedious to get everything assembled and accurate and descriptive and have good instructions and step-by-step information if you're doing a tutorial. So if you look at his blog posts, if you are just not in awe of how detailed and meticulous and comprehensive and step-by-step and explanatory, and there's screenshots and videos, and it's just like, wow. I mean, they're immaculate. Blog of the Year award. It's just, anyway. So he's done 2 great blog posts lately, and both on small, granular topics. One blog post is just about the ellipsis on buttons or menu items in Business Central. I had never even noticed this before. I'm just like, it's kind of this implicit thing where we're trained that when we see an ellipsis, there's something kind of behind that. But he just has a blog post talking about that, how you can implement ellipsis and how they're used. And it's like, I would have never thought to even realize that. So it's this nice thing where you can use, actually, let me see if I can show it. You can use ellipsis equals true as a property on an action. So I was like, wow, that's really cool. Oops. What am I doing here? Wrong thingy. Okay. So really cool. And then he has another one on potentially moving line items up and down when you're in a, I forgot what that's called. Basically like a grid, moving line items up and down. Now, Jeremy Viska did respond saying he's done this before, but you may encounter some like grid refresh issues or page refresh issues that when you start moving lines up and down, it may start to act a little flaky. And it's just the visual refresh of that data may not work 100% properly. So it comes with a caveat there. So anyway, I thought those are both really cool blog posts, so check those out. Another interesting conversation that came up on Twitter was a question from MVP Shannon Mullins. And she, like myself and several others, are former Dynamics GP consultants, developers, users. And a feature that has existed in Dynamics GP forever is that every line on a sales order, sales invoice, a sales document, every single line can have a different ship to address. And so she is asking for options for combining multiple ship to addresses onto a sales order inside of Business Central. She explained this was out of the box with Dynamics GP, any options or workarounds or apps for Business Central. James replied initially that he tries to avoid it, but that it's a customization to add a ship to code at the line item level. But he warns that it blocks off lots of standard functions such as custom addresses. So that is interesting. So it sounds like it would be a pretty involved process to add custom address, what I would call an address override at the line item level of a sales order. And Renato says that not a perfect solution, but each ship to could be a new sales order. You post each sales order, only the shipment, and then later you batch combine shipments to create one invoice. And Shannon indicates this is for a high volume situation, so it'd just be kind of messy to manage it. But James replied, create an order worksheet with, I don't know if that's a typo, SEER order, care order, some type of function, order function that creates separate orders. He's done it many times and it's fast for order entry than normal order, so it's viable for volume. So I'm looking into what that might mean and whether that's a typo or some other feature that I'm not familiar with. So anyway, interesting challenge. I don't know how commonly it is used, at least in the US, but it is definitely used, and Shannon's note about higher volume is probably more of a common use case. So I saw a comment about franchises. So you have a corporate office that may ship to 50 franchise locations throughout a country, and they don't want to create 50 orders for those 50 franchises. So they will place one order and it will ship to 50 franchise locations. So that's a common use case apparently. So I thought that was an interesting one, and I'm curious to see how that develops. Jeremy Viska is in touch with Shannon to see if that's something that can be developed or how much work that'll be. Okay, next up. I did a poll. Since I was working on the OAuth and REST API testing, I just was exploring different tools, and I just asked, what is your preferred tool for testing Business Central REST APIs? And I gave the choice of Postman and the VS Code REST client extension. So that is an extension you can install in VS Code. And it looks like there are two. It looks like there's one real one, and then there's like a knockoff one. So just look at number of downloads when you install these extensions in VS Code. I don't know if there are security concerns, but it's kind of weird how people are creating duplicates. I don't know if it's a fork or what they're doing, but so it looks like Postman is the predominant tool, which makes sense. It's very full featured. However, the VS Code REST client looks like if you're into writing more of the code aspect of the REST API testing, there might be some benefits there. It does have some simplicity in some aspects. But AJ recommended something called the Thunder client, and that is also a VS Code extension. And it's kind of interesting. It seems to combine the VS Code extension with UI functionality of Postman. So it is interesting. You create variables through a UI and you can call things, and it's all contained within VS Code. And he points out that you can put the workspace and your, I guess, your requests in Git control. So that's interesting. However, Postman, you can save your environments and your variables and everything, and then it syncs across workstations. So it is pretty convenient, but does require an install, does require a fair amount of configuration. So there is a learning curve with either way. The one limitation I'm seeing, especially testing OAuth with the user impersonation or device code or whatever that's called, that other OAuth flow, is that I would like an API testing tool that has a web rendering of the response. So for instance, when I do a user impersonation flow in either VS Code, Thunder Client, or Postman, I want to be able to render that response as HTML so I can, or as a web page, so either I can authenticate interactively from within that client, or I can enter the device code from within that client without having to copy the URL and kick out to a web browser. It's like really annoying to be able to have to first test in this tool, but then in order to get my authorization code or whatever it's called, I need to open a browser, paste in. It's like, come on. It just seems so unfriendly and cumbersome when you know you need to test, but you know you have a user interactive prompt. Like, these tools, as far as I could tell, don't accommodate that. I think I might have seen one workaround, but it looks like it's just hokey. So if anyone has a way to do API testing in a tool like Postman or VS Code REST Client, but also render a response for the user impersonation or authorization code or device code or whatever it's called, to enter that in the Microsoft authentication web page without having to jump out to a browser, I'm all ears, because having to swap between these two things and copy URLs and use Notepad to assemble and grab the codes, it's just not friendly in the least. So I'm seeing a lot of friction in my learning of OAuth. Okay, next up. You may not be aware, but BcContainerHelper version 2.0.13 has been released. And the only way I would know this is because I have an automated script, a PowerShell script that runs every morning. It checks my version of BcContainerHelper on my Docker server. It then goes out and checks the latest version available for download, whatever that is. For BcContainerHelper, it compares the two versions, and if there is a difference, it automatically updates it. If you're interested in that script, I have a blog post on the topic. I'll try to remember to put it in the description below. But I got a reminder, I guess Friday, saying, hey, I found a new version of BcContainerHelper. I have updated it and I have confirmed the current version is now 2.0.13. It took 30 seconds for me to do. So I get that email notification at 6:40 a.m. automatically. It's like, oh, cool. It's done. It's updated. And it lets me know that, oh, there is a new release. So very helpful for me to just kind of be aware that there was an update, this happened, and that it was successful. So it's just a reminder to constantly update BcContainerHelper, which so far I don't think there's any downside. So I'd recommend updating it regularly, and nothing better than an automated PowerShell script that is run every morning via Task Scheduler. So I highly recommend it. And the next tip is working outdoors. And if you follow me on Twitter, you may see that I post my afternoon office photos. And this was one from a while ago. We were cooped up in the house from, the COVID carnival. And my kids are at home doing the whole virtual school. And I was getting sick and tired of staying home all day. And so I said, let's get out, pack up everything, let's go to the park and you can do your homework there. And there's a gorgeous park near us, but the limiting factor in going out and finding a spot to do this is good internet access. So previously, a month or two prior to this, I had a project to figure out where can we go that is nice, where we can work remotely, do homework remotely, hang out, and have a nice park, but have very good internet data speeds on our cell phones. And I did research and found, because even at my house, I have poor cell signal and mediocre data speeds, like less than 10 megabit. It's usable, but it's just borderline. So I found this website called cellmapper.net, and it looks like it's US only. I do not know how any of this works in other countries, but I believe in the US, the cellular companies, AT&T, Verizon, whatever the others are, T-Mobile, they have to publish their cell site information with the US FCC, I think, or local filings, or however that works. And all that gets published and can get aggregated into databases. And this cellmapper.net website makes it available, basic information for free. You can go to search for your area and zoom in all the way down to the street and park bench. And you'll see on the left, that is a screenshot of the CellMapper website of the park in this photo. And you see the fountain there, that is the lake in that screenshot. And you'll notice that if I am at one park bench, I will be within the band 553210, whatever that tower is, bands 2, 4, 12, 14, 30, 66, whatever that means. But I see that it is a narrow cone coming out of that antenna of that tower at that park. Now you notice if I go to a different bench to the east of that cone of cellular service, I will not be in that cone, and I can attest the difference could be as much as 50 to 80 megabits in cell data speed on my cell phone. So if I go to the bench on the west in that cone, I could have 100 plus megabits on my cell phone. If I go to the east right next to a different parking lot, I could have, say, 10 or 20 megabits. So huge difference depending on where I sit in any given park. And it's not perfect, but 100 feet makes a big difference in terms of cell speed, I can attest. So I've figured out how to use this website, how to find a cell tower, find parks nearby, within a park, figure out where to sit or hang out in that park in order to get data speeds, or it's not perfect, so where to roam. Should I go east or west or north to this area of the park in order to get faster data speeds, or this parking lot or that parking lot? And then sometimes there are tables, sometimes we bring the camping chairs and we just hang out and sit there, and I can do work, the kids can do their school or watch YouTube videos or play Minecraft or whatever they want to do to get out of the house. So it has been a lifesaver to get out, have some beautiful scenery outdoors, and really enjoy the parks near us. Sometimes it's simpler. So on the left, you'll see a screenshot. It's kind of clear where to go. On the right, it's kind of a mess. There's like 18 different little cones of cell service and bands. And you'll notice on this screenshot, there's a park. You can't see it. It's kind of a vertical park that runs along what is a drainage area. It's a giant, what's called the LA River here in LA. And we were going to the north of that park near the top. There's like a baseball diamond and stuff. Horrible cell signal. I realized with this cell mapper that if I go to the south, closer to that major road, closer to the cell tower, I was able to get over 100 megabit speeds. So instead of going to the north where the parking lot is in the big park, we now go to the south, much quieter, fewer people. There's this, quiet, isolated park bench, really nice trees and shade. And now I get 150 megabits just by going a quarter of a mile south. So huge difference. So check this site out if you want to get outdoors, take your laptop, do some work outside, get out of the house or office or whatever, and awesome resource. So with that, and US only, unfortunately, you'll have to figure out some solution for other countries. So have a good weekend, and Go learn something. Okay, have a good one.